Hello again, it's Adam from Adam's Corner, and I thought I would talk to you about some disc releases that I have received from late April into the middle of May, as it were, when I'm recording this. Of course, I do my Blu-ray roundup at the end of the month on my podcast, but it's always nice to have a visual component to go along with those videos, or rather those podcasts that I do on my show. So that's what we're going to do here. I've got some of these titles are much anticipated, to be quite honest, and some of you will want to know my thoughts, or have actually privately messaged me to ask me my thoughts, and so I thought I would just do a video so you can get the. So anyway, we'll start with one that I got a little bit later than I expected. And that was the Oceans Trilogy, as it were. I think you can see that there's a little bit of a glare, but I'm trying to get that where you can see it. So anyway, all three of the Oceans films have been released by Warner Brothers on 4K. Unfortunately, this set here, my discs were loose when I received it, and I'm still having trouble keeping them in there, as it were. Snap that one back in, but you can see how the set is housed. It's pretty simplistic. Good transfers on this set if you're a fan of the Oceans trilogy of films. You get mostly archival. In fact, you get all of the extras are archival extras. Who am I kidding? But they are in 4K, and like I said, the audio and video components are, as you would expect. Usually Warner Brothers is pretty solid with their transfers. They every now and then they miss the boat, but most of the time they do a pretty good job. So the Oceans Trilogy released on 4K. Here's a Kino release that I received a little later than expected, and that is Starting Over with Bert Reynolds and Jill Clayberg and Candace Bergen. Now, this movie kind of got mixed reviews. Some people really warmed up to it, and some just didn't quite like it all that much. I know Roger Ebert famously didn't like it all that much. I had seen it maybe 15 years ago or so, and I thought it was it was okay back then. I wasn't crazy about it, but I've lived a lot of life since then, and I was surprised how much I really enjoyed this film. Written by Alan Pakula, or directed by Alan Pakula. This is kind of a change of pace for him. This is Alan Pakula, All the President's Men, that guy, and The Parallax View, and it's written by James L. Brooks, who this was before he had directed a film. It's a new 4K scan of the 35mm camera negative, and a commentary here by Daniel Creamer and Howard S. Berger. The picture quality and sound quality are really good. I guess this is a master that was supplied to Kino Lorber from Paramount, but I would definitely recommend it. It's a romantic comedy, as it were. Bert Reynolds is terrific in this film, actually, and he plays he's a magazine writer who basically Candace Bergen is his wife, and she walks out on him, and then decides she wants him back, but by that time he's already started a new love affair with Jill Clayberg. And this is Jill Clayberg coming off of An Unmarried Woman, which was released in 1978 to great acclaim, and she's doing a variation on that role, I would say, in this film. But I really enjoyed this movie, I have to admit, much more than I had anticipated that I would. And so while we're on the Kino Lorber releases, we'll do a couple more of those, just a few more, before we get to some of the really anticipated titles. I'll save those for last. But the Kino Lorber stuff here, we've got The Lawyer is another one. This is Barry Newman and Harold Gould starring in this. Barry Newman, of course, we unfortunately lost him, I believe, last year at the age of 92. This was directed by Sidney J. Furie, and you get a new audio commentary, again, by Daniel Creamer on this, and the film director, Paul Lynch. And there's some archival excerpts from the director, Sidney J. Furie. Another great transfer on this one, supplied by Paramount Pictures. 4K scan of the 35mm original camera negative. I mean, Kino's just knocking it out of the park with these transfers. And this is it's a really interesting film. It's kind of lighthearted, I guess you would say. in tone. I like it. I can't say it's the best film of its type I've ever seen, but it's really enjoyable. Barry Newman is great in this film. He's a lawyer who's struggling a little bit financially, and he's given this case that he's asked to defend this. I think it's loosely based on the Sam Shepard murder case. If you know anything about that, he was a doctor who was accused of murdering his wife, and that's essentially what this is all about too. But it's some of the twists and turns and are really good. Harold Gould is the prosecuting attorney, as it were, and he's really good in this and steals the show more often than not. So, but I would recommend, if you've not seen this or if you're a fan of it and you're wondering about the transfer, it's really good stuff. The lawyer from Kino Lorber there. There you go. And another one is A Big Man on Campus. And that's another Kino Lorber release. This one originally from Vestron Pictures at that time when they were trying to capitalize on the success of Dirty Dancing, which they also released. And this was I'm assuming that's the only reason they had a lot of extra cash laying around. And I guess that's how the film got funded. I remember seeing the posters for this in my local video store, as it were, and it's just not a good movie, I'm sorry to say. But the transfer is great, and there are a lot of people who have a fondness for this film. It turned up on cable quite a bit, I understand. But I remember seeing the posters for it. It didn't look appealing to me as a teenager, and I finally got around to seeing it now, and it just really, it's essentially a hunchback living in a tower at UCLA who comes down and learns the ways of the world, as it were. And I was really amazed at the cast in this. You have Cindy Williams, Jessica Harper, and Tom Skerritt turning up in fairly substantial roles in this film. Again, great transfer, 2K scan from the 35mm inner positive, and you get a commentary from the director of the film, Jeremy Kagan, interview with the actor and screenwriter Alan Katz, alternate ending. If you're a fan of this movie, it's a must, but for me, the actual film itself was just not to my liking, so I guess my original gut feeling on that, having avoided it years ago, was probably, my original instincts were probably right. But anyway, moving along, so we have the classic Western. Here you go, High Noon. And this is, of course, Gary Cooper. What else can you say? And this is he's the retiring sheriff, as it were, who's forced to defend his town one more time as he's basically getting married and beginning to start a new life. He's marrying Grace Kelly, and who wouldn't want to give up their day job, if they had the opportunity to marry Grace Kelly, I guess. So anyway, this is a very good. A very good Western, I would say. It pretty much lives up to its reputation. Maybe not quite, but pretty close anyway. Great performances, a lot of great character actors who turn up in supporting parts. Lee Van Cleef and Lloyd Bridges in an early role here. This is a terrific transfer. It's a 4K release of this film for the first time ever. 4K scan of the 35mm camera negative. And you get an audio commentary by the film historians Julie Kurgo and Alan K. Rode, and the making of High Noon, and a couple of featurettes. So this is, if you're a fan of High Noon, the story of a sheriff who's forced to defend his town one last time. Yes, it's a good film and a terrific transfer of this. So I would vouch for this one. So we're coming up on a couple of the more requested titles, the ones that people have really anticipated, and one of those would be The Crow. That is a Paramount release. This is a Steelbook edition. I'll let you see the Steelbook, as it were. There you go, folks. The Crow, Steelbook. I remember seeing this in 1994 when it originally came out. I thought it was okay then, but I didn't quite understand all of the love and praise that was heaped on this film. It was a simple revenge film for me that was done with some nice stylistic touches, but it was kind of unmemorable. I was curious to see how I would react to it 30 years later, and I kind of felt the same way. It's your standard revenge flick, of course, with Unfortunately, there's a tragic story with Brandon Lee getting, unfortunately, meeting an untimely end while he was filming the movie, and everybody knows that story, I'm sure, so I'm not going to reiterate it, but it's not a bad film by any stretch of the imagination, but it's just kind of, it's a standard revenge thing with a lot of interesting visual stuff going on, stylistic touches from director Alex Proyas, who started out in music videos and such and went on later to do Dark City. This is a great transfer on this 4K edition. I will say the bit rate, if you're curious about that, dips up, or rather it goes all the way up to about 65, 70 megabytes per second at times. It's a really, really good looking transfer, great audio transfer as well. If you were thinking about making the upgrade to on the Crow, yes, you definitely want to do that. Especially if you're a fan. And I'm told that that this is sold out in some places. I don't know if they're repressing them, but nevertheless, The Crow with Brandon Lee and this limited 30th anniversary edition steelbook, and you get a few new. There's a new Shadows and Pain Designing the Crow featurette. And you get a lot of legacy extras, including an interview with the late producer Ed Pressman, audio commentary with the Alex Proyas, audio commentary with the screenwriter, and just a lot of good. So The Crow, if you were thinking about getting that, and if you can get your hands on one, I'd recommend that. Another very anticipated title is Paramount's release of Once Upon a Time in the West. And we'll open that up for you and let you see that that great artwork there. There you go. So, Once Upon a Time in the West. This is a very controversial release. A lot of people who are, and your opinions of the film are, this is a film that's held in high esteem by a lot of people. I don't think it is quite on the same level as Sergio Leone's the trilogy of films he did with Clint Eastwood prior to this. I don't think it's up to that level, but there are some great moments in this film. I will concede to that, although it just never did capture my attention the way those previous trilogy of Western films did. And so maybe that has something to do with the content of the film. For me, is just not as good as those other films. But about the transfer, this is very controversial because it's the disc is only 66 gigabytes, whereas The Crow, I think, is a 100 gigabyte disc. This is a very for a film that's 2 hours and 45 minutes. They should have definitely put this out on a disc that had a lot more room to breathe. The bit rate on this disc barely gets above 35, and that's not a lot of breathing room for a 4K presentation of a film that's as much heralded and anticipated as this one. There's not a lot. Most of the grain that was inherent in the film, it was shot in Techniscope, which is a film format that does have a lot of grain inherent in the picture. There's not a lot of grain on display, folks, in this transfer. I'm going to tell you right now. I would love to see what the raw 4K scan looked like before they started tinkering around with it, and I would maybe have a better idea of what was done or not, but it looks to me like there's been a little bit too much digital noise reduction. There is some fine detail in certain scenes if you look really close, but I actually would have to say that the Blu-ray, if you're looking for grain in your film transfer of this, there's more grain in the Blu-ray that was released back in 2011. And so you might want to keep that in mind. If you do want to make the 4K upgrade, you could certainly do worse. You get a new commentary by the hosts of the Spaghetti Western podcast and a new look back with Leonard Maltin, and the rest of the extras are archival extras. So Once Upon a Time in the West from Paramount. It's a controversial release. I would say it's a mixed bag, but if you're a fan of the film, you probably want to apply. And so we'll round up this review video with one of my favorite releases. I was so excited about this when I heard it was coming out, and it did not disappoint. Francis Ford Coppola's The Rain People is probably one of his most personal films, more personal than the later stuff he did, even Apocalypse Now or The Conversation. It's a beautiful film about a woman played by Shirley Knight who is just unsure of herself, and she decides to leave her husband, and she just gets in a car one day and drives off, and she picks up a hitchhiker played by James Caan. He's a brain-damaged ex-football player, and she picks him up with the idea of maybe having an affair with him, but then she realizes that he's mentally challenged and that he doesn't have anybody to take care of him, and she tries to leave him, but she just winds up finding herself being his caretaker, more or less, because there's nobody else to protect him. And it's just she eventually starts a romance with Robert Duvall, and the three of them, the plot converges on all three of them at the end of the film in a way that is very tragic and heartfelt. This is just these characters in this film are so well drawn and so well written, and there's terrific flashbacks that Coppola inserts into the film to give you their backstory. It's done very cinematically. This is a very personally felt film. I love it, and I'm so glad that it's out on Blu-ray. Unfortunately, there are no extras, and I was hoping that George Lucas did a terrific documentary about the making of this film that was that you can get on YouTube. I was hoping it would appear here, maybe restored, but that's not the case. But nevertheless, Warner Archive doing the releasing honors on this new restoration of The Rain People, Coppola's The Rain People. I should have a report on his other film that's coming to Blu-ray pretty soon. You're a Big Boy Now, his 1966 big studio debut, also a Warner Brothers film. I should be talking about that in a future episode. So anyway, that's about it for this episode. I've tried to pack in a lot in a little bit of time, and thanks again for watching my videos as always, and I hope you find something useful here. Like, subscribe, comment. I love interacting with you guys who or gals or whoever is watching the video. So thanks again for those who do follow me, and I do appreciate it. Until next time, keep those discs a-spinning.